In the autumn of 2010, Final Fantasy XIV was failing in front of the whole world, the most expensive disaster the company had on its hands in years. It was the kind of wreck a careful man would keep his distance from. Yoshida went the other way. A man who had no part in the disaster walked into the office of Yoichi Wada, the president of Square Enix, and made the case that the whole company should drop everything and save the thing. He wasn't acting alone though. The people still fighting to save the game had been coming to him for weeks after hours with their worries. Surprisingly, Wada decided to hear them out. So in late November, the studio made the call. Hiromichi Tanaka, who had run the launch, took the blame and stepped down. And that December, both of his jobs came to Yoshida, the producer's chair and the director's, and the whole of Final Fantasy XIV, now his. To Yoshida, it was the chance to work on a numbered Final Fantasy, one of the crown jewels of the company, and he took it gladly, even if he never really liked the public nonsense that his job would put him in. Except this chance was a crater. But first, he had to look at who he had been handed. The team had come with the wreck. Most of them were the people who had built the failure in the first place, and to most of them, he was a stranger, straight off Dragon Quest and an arcade game about cars. The exception was Hiroshi Minagawa, one of the stray dogs who was also cast out beside him a few years back, pulled back in to help. So he told them straight, if they didn't like the way he worked, they could leave, no hard feelings. All he wanted was 3 months. The room split. A few were in. Plenty thought it was hopeless and said so to his face. A couple were angry he had even asked at all. The first to say yes was a sound guy named Masayoshi Soken, and he's the one Yoshida still remembers. So he and the remaining people got to work. Over the next month or two, they combed the whole game and wrote down every change they wanted. The list ran past 10,000 entries, and the answer was one nobody was going to like. So he laid out 2 options for the people upstairs. The safe one was to patch what they had, claw back some of the money, and live with the result. It will cost them the Final Fantasy name, maybe for good this time. The other option was lunacy, and it was the one he wanted. They would keep the failed game running and the money coming in, and in secret, build a brand new Final Fantasy XIV from the ground up. Same name, same world, and one day it will walk out and take the old one's place. He argued it was the only way back to the players, the one shot at making them look up and see Final Fantasy doing something crazy again. And this time, even the money people came down on his side in the end. Risky, the CFO said, but necessary. So the aim was to have the new game ready by the end of 2012. First though, they had to keep the old game alive long enough to replace it. And for half a year, it was so fragile that even pushing on it made him come apart in their hands. When he sat down to play it himself, he lasted about 5 minutes, and spent most of them trying to get out. He couldn't even work out how to quit. Every time he clicked the little X in the corner, a box would pop up warning him his progress might not be saved, so he would click no, and it would drop him back straight into the world. Click the X again, same warning, back in again. Years before, he had taught himself to write code, so he knew the warning was bullshit. It saved to the server every few seconds, and the whole thing had been built for PC, except you couldn't play it without plugging in a controller. Then he got to the fighting and found there was barely any to it. 15 people could pile into one party, and the healer would cast the strongest heal over and over without ever running out, so the group just stood there out healing whatever they fought. The thing didn't even have auto attack a year after it launched. So he set about fixing it. The interface came first, then the fighting, then everything else. He put Minagawa on nothing but the menus, building a way to run the whole game cleanly from a controller. The whole rebuild ran off one enormous spreadsheet, and he broke the work down even further. Every single move a class like the Dragoon could make was its own line on the sheet, with its own spec that took a couple of hours to write. He read every one of them himself, 15 minutes apiece. Each person had to put 2 numbers on a task, the fastest they thought they could finish it, and the slowest they would admit to. Then he watched whose work kept coming in at the slow end, and quietly patted that person's next guess. And the worst offender of all was himself. He did the repairs out in the open, a patch at a time, where anyone still playing could watch. He tore out the system that had been punishing people for staying on too long. The marketplace, 20 near identical rooms you walk through one by one to buy a single potion, became a single search box. Players got a chocobo to ride again. The old Final Fantasy jobs came back, the paladins, the dragoons, and the black mages, each one with a quest line you had to earn. Month after month, another patch. The dying game a little less broken than the month before, and all the while, out of sight, he was building the bigger one, a whole new game from scratch. They started it with a new engine. He split the team and put some of them on keeping the old game alive while the rest got on with building its replacement. He made something like 400 of the big calls up front all at once, so nobody would ever have to stop and wait on him for an answer. Most of his current programmers had never built an online game in their lives, so he made them learn the systems that already worked, inside and out, before he would let them write any of the new one. And the whole time he was playing World of Warcraft, the biggest game in the business, and trying to learn what worked. The patches the players had been getting were the new game's parts, getting their first run on live players before the new game even existed. They held on for as long as they could. The new game still wasn't finished. A rebuild from nothing usually took 4 or 5 years, and he didn't have that long. But it was coming, one way or another. He had done his part, the impossible part, in secret. But in the end, the one thing he couldn't build was whether the players who had walked away would ever come back. The game had been out for 2 years now. It had launched broken, and the hundreds of thousands who came to see it gave it a few weeks and then gave up, until the huge world they had come for stood all but empty. But not everyone had walked away though. A stubborn few still logged in every night because they weren't done with the place yet. They had stayed, their friends had stayed, and the rest of the world thought the lot of them were mad for it. All the while though, there was something in the sky. A small red star had shown up over the land one day. Far off, easy to miss. Then, patch by patch, month by month, it came closer. It got bigger. It turned from a dot into a second moon, hanging fat and red over everything. Lower every time they logged in, until by the end, it had swelled bigger than the sun and seemed to fill the whole sky. Deep down, everyone knew, more or less, what was coming. The thing they tried to hold so deeply was slipping away. It should have been hope, and for some of them, it was. But they had loved dead games before. Every last one of them gone into the ground and never came back up, so they knew better than to hope too hard. Maybe this was just a funeral with a nicer ending than most, and they were about to lose the thing they loved all over again. And then the last night came. They threw the doors open for the end. Free. That last little while. Come one, come all. And they came. The faithful and a wave of the ones who had left years before, all back to see the place off. Whole servers of them gathered up and went walking, on foot and on the backs of their big yellow birds, in one long ragged column out across the land to the field where it would finish. There they gathered, the whole server of them, while the world came apart at their backs, monsters loose in the streets, the sky gone red and low, and they waited for the end. Finally it came. The second moon they had watched fall for a year broke open at last, and when Bahamut spread its wings, everything ended. It wasn't clean, of course. Half of them spent the last night fighting the login screen instead of looking at the dragon, thrown out by the crowds, watching the death of their world through a friend's stream, while they hammered a key that wouldn't let them back in. One man got knocked offline half an hour before the end and never got back in at all. Another clawed his way in for the final 15 minutes and stood on a hill outside the city with the people from his guild, just to be there when the lights went out. A lot of them cried that night, grown adults at their keyboards in the small hours, and they'll say so now without a flicker of embarrassment. And then for a long time, there was nothing, just a black square on the screen where a world used to be. Months of it. The people who had stayed to the end had stayed for what came next, and now there was nowhere to log into. But they couldn't put it down even then. The story had gone dark mid-sentence. The old mage last seen standing in the path of the fire, and it had never told them whether he lived. They carried it for months, a small, ridiculous grief for a man who was never real, in a world that wasn't there to go back to. They had all told the place goodnight instead of goodbye, like they would be back when it woke up, but nobody had ever brought a game back from this far down. Then the test version opened a few months early, and the dead game got mobbed. Servers buckling under 100,000 people and more, climbing past anything they had built for, all of them piling into a beta of a game the world had written off and coming back out saying the one thing nobody had said about it in years, that it was actually good. And then, it was real. The world came back on the 27th of August 2013, the same one they had lost, remade, the same cities and the same map with all the broken sanded off. They walked back into it a year older, and it was theirs once again. And it remembered them too. Those who had stayed to the end got their names written into the credits of the world they had refused to let die. Then the servers fell over again, but this time it was because everyone was trying to get in at once. People would sit at the login screen for an hour, 2 hours, thrown back by a line that years before would have broken their hearts and now read like the best news on earth. The world is full. So full, the company had to do the strangest thing of all and stop selling the game, pull it off the shelves, because they couldn't build the place fast enough for everyone trying to move in. The ones who had stuck with the broken thing came back to a whole one and loved it more than they ever had. The dead game had climbed up out of the ground, and now the whole world wanted in. The song was still there too, the same voice that had sung the old world out, that had played on the wind while the moon came down. Now it was the sound of the new one, the song that played them home. And this time, it wasn't going anywhere. The Final Fantasy, finally reborn and beloved.